Hello everyone. How are you feeling today? Great? Yes, I think I am very excited to be here, very grateful. Alicia was the first that was able to, to say my surname, Fábio Zefksik, in the first time here. For me, it's a great honor to be here. I am from Brazil. It's my first time here, my first time talking. So like I said, I'm very excited, very nervous, very anxious, but I think it will work in some way. I also remember that I was at the end of last year making my budget plan with my boss, and he asked me what kind of events, what are the cybersecurity events that I would like to attend, and of course, RSA was one of the first I told you. And she told me, Fabio, here's the deal. I will play all the plane tickets, all the accommodations and hotels, but you are responsible to get the RSA tickets. Oh my God, okay, let's try. And after 2 or 3 days, Fabio, do you see that there's a call for paper in website? I said, yes. Why don't try to submit a speaker and go talk about what you are doing here at Open Finance Brazil? Okay, challenge accepted. And here I am talking about a little bit more about me. My name is Fabio, I'm from Brazil. I work with cybersecurity since 1999, a long time. I started to work in some big 4 companies like KPMG, EY, PwC as well. I also was head of cybersecurity in some companies, banks, industry. And 1 year ago, approximately, I had the opportunity to join the Open Finance team. And nowadays, I am in charge of cybersecurity, privacy, and IT operations. And what we're going to talk today is what are the security challenges that we have been in Open Finance, security, privacy, and also I intend to talk a little about the evolution of authentication and authorization methods that we are using. OpenID Connect. How many of you, before I get started, how many of you work with Open Finance, Open Banking, or have been heard about? Okay. Oh, cool. Any of you work with Open Banking specifically? Yeah? Cool. There's someone from UK here? No? Australia? UK? Okay, cool, cool. OpenID Connect, together with OAuth 2, develop a framework that we call FAPI. And FAPI is an evolution of methods of authentication authorization. So my objective here is to go through APIs methods of authentication authorization through FAPI and see what we have been done, okay? First of all, what is Open Banking or Open Finance? Open Finance is obviously an evolution of Open Banking, but what's the objective of Open Banking or Open Finance? You could share some information, personal information, bank information, and in benefit, you receive some better option of credit or taxes rated, something like that. The big difference here is that while in Open Bank, you just share your banking account information, when it comes to Open Finance, you could share payroll, crypto, student loan, retirement, investment plans, credit card, checking, and all these things. Obviously, when you decide to share this kind of information, like I said, you receive some kind of benefits from it, okay? Just to give you some numbers, what is Open Finance in Brazil? We had 20 billions of API calls since 2022. 27 million of given consents. All the Open Finance work with consents. You need to consent and share your data. About 500,000 payments done, and here we are not talking about the value, but the quantity of payments done through Open Finance, okay? And we have more than 800 registered financial institutions. Just to compare, I think in UK you have about 80 institutions, Australia a little less, and here in Brazil we have about 800, is a great number. 70 PISPs, Certified Payment Initiation Providers, and about 600 people working directly with tech groups. How it's work? We have a regulator, Banco Central do Brasil, Central Bank of Brazil, that defines what should be implemented. For example, Pix. Do you know Pix? Instant payments. Do you use Pix? There's a lot of guys from Brazil here, yeah? There's someone that is not from Brazil that are using Pix. Pix is an instant payment. You could transfer your values any time of the day, any day, and the value go to the another counter immediately, okay? This is called Pix. So you have about 600 people work with tech groups to make Open Finance happen. There is a cybersecurity group, there is a privacy group, there is a specification group, UX group, a lot of groups. Then when Central Bank of Brazil define a solution, define a business model that should be implemented, we go through these groups and architect the best solution, give it back to Banco Central, and after that, the financial institutions implement it. What are the key objectives of Open Finance in Brazil? The first one, establish control of data by its real owner, like in GDPR or LGPD, something like that. Free data sharing with total transparency. Stimulate innovation in current and future business models. I will bring to you a use case of a solution that we're going to implement that we call journey payment without redirection. You will be able to pay through your PSP without being redirected to your bank account. I will show you. And ensure information security through entire journey. So, to get started, what are our security and private challenges? Let's talk about the API security within the financial ecosystem. Like I said, all the information shared, all the Open Finance is based on API, okay? All the information you could share, you consume, the payments are based on APIs. So let's talk a little about APIs. Before that, here are all the cybersecurity components you have in the ecosystem, okay? The first one, obviously the final user, that you make a call to your institution, API call, and he goes through authorization server. Authorization server will check if the user is really that user, and you grant access to a resource through a resource server. This is basically the basic functionality of Open Finance. But aside, we have a lot of components. Digital certificates, OpenID providers, security monitor for sure. But what I like to highlight here is these two components here, OpenID Foundation, compliance, and FAPI. FAPI means Financial Grade API. It's a framework or certification that OpenID made to guarantee the API security through the ecosystem. Okay? We're going to talk about FAPI in the evolution of authentication in authorization mechanisms. I don't know how many of you work with APIs, but it's simple like that. I like to imagine APIs like a customer that are in a restaurant, and there's a menu of a lot of options, and they ask to the waiter a order. The waiter go to the chief and return the food made by customer by the customer. Obviously, there's a lot of problems here in this simple implementation. For example, a waiter could send the food to a wrong table. The waiter, in some case, don't ask the customer if they prefer the food more salty or more spicy, something like that. So because of it, we're going to talk about the evolution of security to avoid these things to happen, okay? We have a lot of technology here. The objective is not talk about these technologies, but there's not just have REST APIs, GraphQL, gRPC, but we have a lot of evolution from here. But what I want to say is that we're using Open Finance, the REST APIs, and a lot of operations done by GET, POST. And what the objective to use REST? Because you need to guarantee the interoperability between financial institutions at all, okay? And to get started about evolution of APIs, the first one is basic authentication. It's very knowledge. In this case, you send your username and password through a header and using a base64 encode. We all know that base64 is not a kind of encryption, and sometimes you send this with no HTTPS channel, and if you intercept this connection, you usually discover the username and password. This is the first one that has been used for authentication authorization of APIs. After that, we come to API keys. API keys is a little more secure, but it's not secure at all. You use here some information that you provide, for example, IP address, and with this information, your name, password, IP address, we create a key, and this key is used when you need to authorization. But they are vulnerable as basic authentication if you could intercept the connection, okay? And then you come to OAuth 1.0, then OAuth 2.0. And here there's a little different because they are introducing a token-based authentication authorization system. You have a key authorization server, and we want to access resource. There you'll be generate a token, and the token will be used when you need to authenticate. It's different from API keys. After that, it's not secured of 1.0. You need to keep evolving. So we use here OAuth 2.0. OAuth 2.0 use access token and refresh tokens to obtain access token. So in some way, we are increasing security. And here comes OpenID Connect. OpenID Connect adds an identity layer, and we can able to identify the client that you will be calling API information. And we also use a JWT token that is we can encrypt this information through header. But very fast, what they are in common, all of these methods here. Basic authentication, API keys, OAuth 2, OAuth 1, and OpenID Connect. When it comes to financial institutions, we need to create a more secure way to share our informations. Because if you go to the site of OpenID Connect, there is a lot of RFCs. And RFCs define what should use, what it's mandatory use, what is recommended use of protocols, of versions of cryptography, something like that. But when financial grade APIs are created, we go through these RFCs and start to specify what items are be mandatory in terms of security, in terms of cryptographic keys, in terms of authentication, a lot of things. The creation of FAPI, there are some aspects here that they are improving, stronger authentication. You could use MFA authentication, enhanced authorization, high security protocols, a lot of protection against attacks. You're going to talk about PXE and how prevent it for man-in-the-middle attacks, and also provide auditability and compliance, okay? The FAPI was created originally in 2017 as probably a demand for PSD2 regulation across Europe, and then was adopted by UK Open Banking, FDX in US or Canada, and CDR Australia, and also in Brazil we adopt this in September 2022, and we are growing up and involving this matter since then. What is FAPI acts in the context of the payment? So you have here your PSP, and before you confirm your payment, we go through the FAPI scope in terms of authentication, authorization, and then you get back your information to your PSP. I bring you some diagrams to explain that. Here's the difference between FAPI 1.0 and 2.2.0. The first one, FAP 1.0, it's based on WAF 2.0, use the same protocol for authorization, use the OpenID Connect for end-user authentication, and MTLS or private key. In this case, in Open Finance, you are using until now MTLS, okay? And you have now signed encrypted ID token. All the ID token passed by requirements are being encrypted. Use of strong encryption algorithms for signing encryption tokens, and PXE is recommended but not mandatory, okay? This is a brief example of FAPI, how it works, and how can it prevent from fraudulent access or the token exchange. After that, there's an evolution of FAPI, FAPI 2.0. We not adopt all the mechanisms here of FAPI 2.0, but we are now using PXE. PXE are mandatory, so we have protection against code interception. More secure authorization requests use JAR and PAR, push authorization requests, to increase security authorization, and strong encryption standard. There's another diagram here. I will explain in more details later. What are the risk mitigated with FAPI 2.0? Basically here, when you have a malicious app and you have the same schema, he could intercept the requisition and receive the response from the authentication share, the system browser. And when you use PXE are the two methods of verifying, the code challenge and the code verifier. And this is generated by your application and cannot be intercepted. So increase a lot in terms of security here. And the same way, the replay attacks function the same way when you use PXE PAR. I will talk more about this later, okay, in the use case. And we also have the privacy challenge is not different that we see in LGPD law or GDPR law, but basically we need to guarantee that the data that the user should to share choose to share, you'll be use it with the same need, with the same purpose as the original, okay? If I choose to share a credit card data with financial institution, that information could not be used for, I receive, for example, a credit or something like that. So you have the Article 6 of LGPD. LGPD is, like I said, data privacy law in Brazil, and you have all of these aspects to comply. Data prevention, protection, security, transparency, all of these aspects you need to comply with. And here is how we manage all the consents given and how we guarantee the law adherence. In the first moment, the user, well, the receiving institution requests the customer consent to share the data. He will be redirected to the transmission institution. You make the authentication, confirmation, the information you want to share, and after that, you receive the information with the data that he chooses to share. It's simple like that. Now I will try to explain a little bit more about the use case I told you in the beginning. Imagine the situation when we have a background, e-commerce platform, and wants to offer the customer a seamless and secure checkout process that minimizes friction. And the goal is allowed to user to authenticate the authorization payment transaction directly with the checkout flow without the need to be redirected to your bank app. Imagine you are in a PayPal, for example, and need to buy an item that you are buying by your banking account. In the process, in a normal process, you will choose your product, you select your bank account, you go to your bank account, you'll be redirected to your bank account, you put your username, your password, something like that, you authentication, after that, you'll be redirected again to your PSP to make the final process. What's the idea here? The authorization and confirmation steps, all the process, by the way, will be made by 4 or 5 clicks or toads, okay? And how we are doing it, we are implementing the solution yet, probably not after the end of this will be implemented, but we are integrating here, two solutions, FAPI and FIDO2. Have you ever been, do you know FIDO2? Do you use some FIDO2 solutions at your company? Yes. Windows Hello use FIDO2 when you need authentication by using your biometry, passwordless. Windows Hello use FIDO2, okay? Let's see how it works. So the first, you are in the marketplace. You need to set your payment method. Your user are prompted to enroll through on-time setup process. So in this process, you linking your banking account to platform that you're using your device, your FIDO2. FIDO2, there's a concept here that he use. What do you know? What do you know could be a PIN, a password, something like that. Who you are, your biometry, your some kind of biometry. What do you have? What you have could be your cell phone, could be your laptop. I use these 3 kinds of information to compose FIDO key, okay? This process will create a cryptographic key pair, private and public key pair. And after that, the e-commerce will store the public key and associate this public key with the user and the payment method that he chooses. The private key will remain secured on the user device. This is the first step. I will show you again in a diagram later. Step 2, checkout and payment initiation. When you make a purchase, user selects the payment method at the checkout. The e-commerce platform initiates a payment through its server that communicates with the bank API protected by FAP. And now, in this moment, we are using FAP to communicate. The payment request includes transaction details and announce unique on-time user number to prevent replay attacks. Every transaction will be a unique on-time user number. Then we go through authorization. Instead of redirect the user to the bank's authentication page, the e-commerce triggers a FIDO2 authentication and promptly direct with this interface. Here we can see the user request to put a biometry or something like that. The user authentications and the device they have been registered and generate a signature using the private key, okay? And the bank, you verify the signature against the stored public key at the nonce. And the last one, the confirmation. After authentication payment authorization, the bank sends a confirmation to the e-commerce platform, and the e-commerce platform sends the confirmation message and a receipt to the user. I don't know if, I think the letter is very small. At the end of you can see? No? That's possible to read here? No? Yeah? Okay. I will try to explain. Here at diagram 4, we will have 2 steps, exactly what I told before. We have here account linking, and what I want you to focus here is all the interaction that happens between the user, the PSP, the SPSP, and after that, how it will be the interaction when it comes to payment initiation. So here, select your PSP, and the PSP, you make all that steps of registrations, FIDO, directly with your banking account, okay? You generate here the FIDO, register options, the private key, the public key, all these steps will be made between the user, the device, the PSP, APSP. And what's the difference here? Once that steps have been done, look now the interaction between the user and your banking account. Not exist. When you make so the first time, obviously you have to make all the process of registration, generate token, private, public key. But after that, once it has been done, the user, you not in not case you interact with your bank account. User interact with device, with your PSP. The PSP, you make all the process of create a token, confirming, create a consent, subscript options for FIDO, send it back to your device, and there's request the biometric for the user, and here, there's a new options that we have been using here, risk signals. We can add risk signals to this process, and I will talk about, to guarantee that the user is really the user, to guarantee that a normal behavior is happening. So it's just an example. That's a lot of probably 30 or 40 risk signals that could be used. What you have here, unique ID device, flag for rooted device, jailbreak is something like that. The level of brightness of the screen of the user, the time the device is on, the geolocation, the IP address, flag for ongoing call, indicates that active call is happening at the moment of the connection, a flag for active developer mode. we can bring all these risk signals to this process in order to improve security, okay? So if you perceive that something is abnormal, we can request, for example, that user authentication again or provide some additional information to complete the payment journey, okay? So after risk signals, again, there's a process between PSP and ASPSP, and user, you just receive for PSP the message that authorization, the payment are concluded with success or no. Look, you don't have the user interacting anymore with your bank account in this workflow, okay? This is the process that we are implementing there. And what are the benefits? Enhancing user experience. User enjoy frictionless checkout experience without being redirected outside the e-commerce platform, leading to high conversion rates, of course. If you have a good user experience, probably you'll be leading to higher conversion rates. Another benefit is regulatory compliance. The solutions meet with the SCA requirements for stronger authentication, access, and PSD2 as well, by using strong cryptographic user authentication. Increased security, leveraging FIDO2 for authentication, FAPI for security API communications. The solution offers robust protection against fraud and unauthorized transactions. Concluding, when we integrate FIDO and FAPI, e-commerce platforms can offer the service with create a seamless, secure, and compliant payment journey that enhances user experience. There's a conflict between user experience versus plus security in all of the components, in all of the process. So if you could, in this journey, reduce this frictionless, we can improve your revenues, improve the revenues of the banks, and provide more ways to fidelize your client, okay? Applying. What are the steps you use to do this journey? And I think it's general you can do as well at your banks, or when you are, I don't know if you are in your country thinking in implementing open banking or open finance, but what the first step you do is obvious access requirements. What are the requirements, the regulations, what you need to do in order to keep all this communication secure. Step 2 was to integrate FIDO2 for authentication and implement FAPI for secure API access. And then we should combine FIDO2 and FAPI for secure transactions like I show you in the last diagrams. Implement risk signals to improve the robustness of your security measure. I show you a lot of risk signals that could be implemented to improve the robustness of your security. And of course, implementing a continuous test and compliance because regulations are always changing. The cyber security requirements, the hackers are always trying to fraud and access our securities, make fraudulent transactions. So the step 6 is extremely important, continuous testing and compliance. Oh my God, I think it's it. A little nervous, but I am here to answer some questions, to share experience. I will be here until Friday. Appreciate all of you. Thank you. Any question?
Hello. hello, great presentation. Where does all the infrastructure run and how is it monetized?
We are all, running all of our, can you see me? Could you hear me? Yeah, okay. We run all of this infrastructure on the cloud. We use AWS for, as a partner. And all the infrastructure, the fact is this decentralized infrastructure. The banks are our infrastructure, and we have in the middle of Open Finance just the, how I can say, the register of APIs and the banks. We don't centralize information in Open Finance. We just define the requirements, the specifications, and the banks should implement it. But we're running all of our infrastructure on the cloud.
Hey, Fábio. Thanks for the presentation. I have one question.
Você pode perguntar em português, Renato?
No, let's speak in English. So I have one question, Fábio, about the FAPI protocol. I understand that you have to align with all the banks to use the same protocol, of course.
Yeah.
But did you start with FAPI already, or do you have to change during the journey?
Open Finance start with FAPI. If you enter the OpenID Connection website, you could see what is FAPI, the specification, where FAPI are being implemented, what the profiles, we have a lot of profiles of FAPI as well to guarantee interoperability. So yes, we start with FAPI.
Okay.
And are in process of evolution.
Okay, thank you.
Luis, good to see you, man. Good to see you. If no one has more, okay.
Hello.
Take it
Thank
easy,
you
man,
for your
please.
presentation. I'm from Chile, Banco de Chile. In my
Banco de
country,
Chile.
we are starting this
Yeah.
journey. And my question is, you started, I assume, using FAPI 1.0.
FAPI
Uh,
1.0.
And what's your plan or your roadmap to go to FAPI 2.0?
Yeah,
and
we are,
which challenges do you think you will find?
I think when you talk about 800 institutions, and when you have FAPI, it means that every institution needs to be certified, okay? Every little change that you do, all of 800 must certify again. And the certification has a price. So we are with this process of evolution, but we need to consider it. But what we should do now to grow the security, but considering that every little change that I made in evolution of FAPI 1.0 to FAPI 2.0, you generate a cost for institution. So you try to balance it, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does it support credit transactions as well as bank to bank?
Yeah. I think open finance in the future we are talking about open data, open energy, open health. In fact, we are integrating open finance with open insurance in Brazil. I think next steps will be open energy, open health, open energy, something like that. But I think the concept is the same. Sharing your information, and from it you receive some kind of benefit. Okay? Thank you again, guys.